stairs groaned beneath my weight, each step a brittle lament as I dragged the final box up to the 5th floor. The air hung heavy, thick with the cloying scent of mildew and something else, a sour note that scratched at the back of my throat and twisted my gut. Apartment 4B squatted at the far end of a narrow hallway, its door painted a repulsive shade of green, the edges peeling away like flaking, diseased skin. Above, water stains charted phantom continents across the ceiling, their brown tendrils whispering tales of years of utter neglect. I wrestled the keys from my pocket, my hands betraying me with a slight tremble born of exhaustion and something deeper, a persistent, gnawing anxiety that had become a grim shadow. At $400 a month, this place was highway robbery, but standing there in the gloom of that corridor, I began to grasp the reason why. The fluorescent light fixture above buzzed with manic energy, casting jittery, restless shadows across the cracked and peeling walls. It flickered with a bizarre, almost rhythmic pulse. 3 quick bursts of light, then a plunge into darkness, followed by 3 more, like a cryptic Morse code I couldn't decipher. The lock resisted, a brief struggle before surrendering with a grinding click that echoed down the empty hallway like a death rattle. The door swung inward with a low, mournful sigh, revealing my new domain. A cramped studio apartment with walls stained a sickly yellow and carpet that had clearly witnessed better decades. Faint outlines marked the floor where the previous tenant's furniture had once stood, darker patches that evoked the grim chalk outlines of a crime scene. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was all Elliot could afford with the crushing weight of student debt threatening to bury him alive. I deposited the box beside the others, surveying the space that was to be both his prison and his sanctuary. A kitchenette cowered in one corner, its cabinet doors hanging askew like broken wings. The laminate countertop was bubbled and peeling in places, revealing the cheap particle board beneath. The sink dripped with a steady, rhythmic persistence, each metallic plink seeming to amplify itself in the oppressive silence. The single window overlooked an alley where garbage cans clustered like grotesque metal mushrooms, their lids askew, spilling their fetid refuse onto the cracked asphalt below. The bathroom door stood ajar, revealing cracked tiles that had once been white but now bore the yellow-brown stains of age and decay. A mirror hung above the sink, its surface reflecting the room with unsettling clarity, as if it were an observer rather than a mere reflector. Something about that reflection disturbed Elliot, not what it showed, but the way it showed it, with a subtle distortion that made everything appear subtly, unervingly wrong. As Elliot turned from his boxes, he nearly knocked one over. A woman stood in the doorway, and every instinct he possessed screamed a silent alarm. She was pale, not just fair-skinned, but pale with a pallor that suggested a vital essence was missing. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to stretch her skin unnaturally, sharpening her features to an almost predatory edge. But it was her smile that made his skin crawl. It was stretched too wide, lips taut like wet canvas pulled over a frame too large. "I'm Clara," she said, her voice oddly melodic, as if she were reciting lines from a play she'd performed countless times. Each syllable was measured, almost rehearsed, with an underlying quality that reminded Elliot of a recording played through damaged speakers. "I live down the hall. You'll like it here, Elliot." Elliot had never told her his name. The lease paperwork, perhaps, but even as he tried to rationalize it, her unwavering stare sent a jolt of primal fear through his stomach. Her eyes were gray, almost colorless, like old glass, and they didn't seem to move when she blinked, an unsettling mechanical movement that reminded him of a doll's eyes. "Thanks," Elliot managed, forcing a smile that felt like a plastic mask on his face. "I'm sure I will." She tilted her head at an unnatural angle, like a bird studying its prey before the strike. The movement was too sharp, too sudden, accompanied by a faint crackling sound that might have been her neck, or might have been something else entirely. "The building has its own rhythm. You'll learn." Her smile remained fixed, unwavering, a mask that never faltered. "Welcome home." She glided away, her steps making no sound on the creaking floorboards, leaving Elliot standing there with goosebumps erupting across his skin like a swarm of insects. Her footsteps, or lack thereof, bothered him almost as much as everything else about her. The building's floors groaned under his weight, protested every movement, yet she moved as if she weighed nothing at all. He shook it off, returning to his boxes, telling himself that old buildings attracted odd tenants, probably just a lonely neighbor trying to be friendly, albeit in the most unsettling way possible. Still, something about the way she'd said his name lingered in his mind like an echo he couldn't quite shake. 20 minutes later, a knock on the door made him jump. The delivery guy from the moving company stood in the hallway, holding the last of his boxes. He was young, maybe Elliot's age, but his face was pale, and his eyes kept darting down the hall as if he expected something to lunge at him from the shadows. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's chill, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the boxes. "Last of your stuff," he said, shoving the boxes at Elliot with more force than necessary. His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nervousness. He glanced past Elliot's shoulder into the apartment, then back down the corridor, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Man, this place gives me the creeps. Bad vibes, you know. Like, seriously bad vibes." Elliot followed his gaze and felt his blood run cold. Clara stood at the far end of the hall, motionless as a statue, watching them. Even from that distance, Elliot could see that unsettling smile splitting her pale face. She didn't wave or acknowledge them in any way, just stared with that mechanical stillness, her head tilted at that same unnatural angle. "She's just a neighbor," I said, though my voice sounded less certain than I intended. A nervous laugh escaped me, falling flat in the stale air. "Yeah, well," he shook his head, already backing toward the stairs with obvious relief. "Good luck with that, man. Seriously, you're going to need it." He practically ran down the stairs, taking them two at a time, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the narrow stairwell. I pulled the boxes inside and closed the door, turning the deadbolt with more force than necessary. The sound of the lock engaging was reassuring, solid, and real in a way that made me feel slightly safer. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive, like the building itself was holding its breath. I told myself it was just the weight of old concrete and neglect, just a strange neighbor and a skittish delivery guy, nothing to worry about. But as I unpacked my clothes, small things began to bother me. The hallway light continued its bizarre pattern. 3 quick pulses, then darkness, then 3 more. The rhythm was so precise it couldn't be random electrical issues. When I paused to listen, a whisper seemed to drift from the heating vent, soft and unintelligible, curling through the air like smoke. I pressed my ear against the metal grate but heard only the building's distant groans and the sound of my own rapid heartbeat. Then my keys slipped from their hook on the wall, hitting the floor with a metallic clatter that made me jump out of my skin. I hadn't touched them. I was across the room unpacking books. The hook was secure, screwed firmly into the drywall with no sign of loosening. I hung them again, testing the hook's stability with increasing agitation. It didn't budge, solid as a rock, yet the incident left me deeply uneasy. I was stressed, that was all. Anyone would be jumpy in my situation. The new job at the design firm downtown was my last shot at a decent salary, my only chance to dig myself out of the financial hole I'd been trapped in since graduation. 3 years of freelancing had barely kept me afloat, scraping by on logo designs and website mock-ups that paid pennies. This designer position was precarious, a 3-month trial period before they decided whether to keep me. One mistake, one missed deadline, one client complaint, and I'd be back to ramen noodles and overdue notices. My phone buzzed with an email from my supervisor. "Great work on the Morrison project. Looking forward to seeing what you can do next." The words should have filled me with relief, but they felt hollow in that dim room with its peeling walls and oppressive atmosphere. I'd spent 18 hours on those designs, hunched over my tablet until my spine felt like it might snap, surviving on coffee and determination. As I bent to plug in my laptop, something extraordinary happened. The persistent ache in my lower back, the one that had plagued me for months from hunching over drawing tablets, simply vanished. The relief was so sudden and complete that I froze, waiting for the familiar stab of pain to return. I straightened experimentally, twisted my spine, stretched my arms overhead. Nothing. For the first time in months, my back felt perfectly normal, as if years of poor posture had been magically erased. I finished unpacking as darkness settled over the city like a heavy blanket. Through the window, I watched the alley transform into a canyon of shadows, punctuated only by a single flickering street light that cast dancing shadows on the brick walls. The apartment felt smaller in the darkness, the shadows deeper and more substantial, as if they were entities unto themselves. At 11:30, as I was brushing my teeth with water that tasted faintly metallic, I heard it. A low hum emanated from somewhere within the walls themselves. It started as a barely perceptible vibration, then grew stronger, a pulse that seemed to match my heartbeat with disturbing precision. The sound made my teeth ache and my skull throb, as if something were trying to drill its way out from the inside. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to locate the source of the unsettling noise. The hum seemed to move, shifting from the kitchen to the living area like something alive, crawling through the building's skeleton. It wasn't mechanical, not a pipe or a furnace or any sort of equipment I could identify. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic, almost like a voice chanting just below the threshold of human hearing. When I checked my apartment door one final time before bed, my blood turned to ice. It was open, just a crack, maybe an inch, but I distinctly remembered locking it after the delivery. The deadbolt was still engaged, yet somehow the door had drifted ajar on its own. Cool air seeped through the gap, carrying that same sour smell from the hallway, more intense now, almost suffocating in its wrongness. I closed the door firmly, checking the lock twice, then wedging a chair under the handle for good measure. The hum faded gradually, leaving only the building's ordinary nighttime sounds. Pipes settling, floors creaking, the distant murmur of other lives behind thin walls. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that old buildings made noises and doors sometimes drifted if they weren't properly aligned. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in my unfamiliar bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and wondered what I had gotten myself into. The rent was too cheap for a reason. The neighbors were wrong in ways I couldn't articulate, and somewhere in the building's depths, something had hummed with patient, predatory intent. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I would look for somewhere else, somewhere normal. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. I couldn't afford to. This apartment was all I could manage. The place might have been wrong in ways I didn't yet understand, but it was mine, and my back pain vanished for the first time in months. Something was watching from the darkness beyond my door, patient, eternal, and utterly inhuman. I woke to silence. No alarm, no traffic, just the building's oppressive quiet pressing against my ears like cotton. It was Friday morning and I didn't have to work. The long holiday weekend stretched ahead. For days of solitude in this place that already felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The air in 4B felt heavier today, thick with moisture that made my skin clammy. I shuffled to the bathroom, and the mirror stopped me cold. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, a shadow flickered behind my reflection. Not mine, something else standing where nothing should be. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When I looked back, the mirror showed only me, pale and wide-eyed. Just tired, I muttered. But my voice sounded hollow in the small space. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I leaned against the counter, trying to shake the unease that had settled in my bones. Above me, footsteps echoed across what should have been an empty floor, slow, deliberate pacing back and forth, like someone wearing heavy boots. But I remembered the building manager mentioning that the 6th floor was vacant, had been for months. The footsteps stopped directly overhead, and I held my breath, waiting. Nothing. I flipped on the TV for background noise, but the screen filled with static, not normal static. Shapes writhed in the gray-white snow, almost forming faces before dissolving back into chaos. I changed channels frantically, but every station showed the same twisted patterns. When I finally found a working channel, the morning news felt jarringly normal after the distorted shapes that seemed burned into my retinas. My phone buzzed with an email from a coworker. Saw your Morrison designs in the client presentation. They loved them. You're definitely making an impression. The praise should have felt good, but it sat wrong in my stomach, like candy that had turned sour. By noon, the walls felt like they were closing in. I needed to get out, do something normal. The building had a laundry room in the basement, and my clothes from yesterday reeked of that sour hallway smell. I gathered my dirty things and headed downstairs. The basement was a maze of concrete corridors lit by buzzing fluorescents. The laundry room sat at the far end, its door propped open. Inside, a man about my father's age fed quarters into a washing machine. He was thin, almost gaunt, with graying hair and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen restful sleep in years. "You're the new guy," he said without looking up. 4B, Elliot. I started loading my clothes into an adjacent machine. "You are Sam." He glanced at me, and I saw a weariness in his expression, like he was sizing up a potential threat. "How's the apartment treating you?" Something in his tone made me pause. "Fine, I guess. It's quiet." Sam's laugh was bitter. "Quiet? Yeah, that's one word for it." He closed his washing machine with more force than necessary. "Word of advice, kid. Keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Just do what you're told." "What do you mean?" But Sam was already heading for the door. "You'll figure it out. Or you won't." He stopped in the doorway, not turning around. "Either way, it's not my problem." His footsteps echoed down the corridor, leaving me alone with the mechanical hum of washing machines and a growing sense that I'd stepped into something far more complex than a cheap apartment. Back in 4B, I ordered the Thai food for lunch. The delivery guy, different from yesterday's moving crew, arrived 20 minutes later. But when I opened the door, he froze, his eyes fixed on something behind me, and his face drained of color. Just leave it on the floor," he stammered, setting the bag down and backing away. I turned to see but Clara standing at the far end of the hallway, watching us with that same unnatural stillness. Her head tilted at that impossible angle, and her smile seemed wider today, stretching her pale face in ways that made my skin crawl. "Clara," I called out, trying to sound neighborly. "How are you?" She didn't respond, just stared. The delivery guy was already at the stairs, taking them two at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Watch yourself." I brought the food inside and locked the door, turning the deadbolt twice. The Thai food tasted wrong, too salty, and with an underlying metallic flavor that made me push it away. Half the afternoon dragged. I tried to work on some freelance projects, but concentration was impossible. Every sound, the building settling, pipes groaning, the elevator's distant ding, set my nerves on edge. The air grew heavier as the day progressed, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I was looking for coffee filters in the kitchen cabinets when I found it, taped to the inside of the cabinet above the sink. A piece of paper covered in cramped handwriting. My hands shook as I peeled away the yellowed tape. The rules: follow them or die. Never make eye contact with the residents of the 5th floor for longer than 3 seconds. If they speak to you first, respond politely but briefly. Never initiate conversation. Leave a glass of water outside your door each night. Do not ask what drinks it. Do not invite them into your apartment under any circumstances. If you hear your name called through the walls, do not answer. Do not acknowledge you heard it. Never be in the hallway alone after midnight. Break these rules and you won't leave 4B alive. They are not human. They are something else wearing human faces. The blessings they give come at a price. But the price of breaking their rules was death. My hands trembled as I reread the note. The paper felt brittle, as if it might crumble to dust at the slightest touch. The ink was faded but still legible, a hasty scrawl that screamed of desperation. At the bottom, in a different shade of ink, "Good luck, M." Clara's too wide smile flashed in my mind, her unblinking stare, the way she moved without a sound, the delivery guy's stark terror, Sam's haunted eyes and his cryptic warnings. It all snapped into place with a sickening, dreadful certainty. Following the rules seemed insane, a descent into madness, but ignoring them felt like a straight shot to suicide. I filled a glass with water and placed it just outside my door, feeling utterly ridiculous, a fool, but far too terrified to do otherwise. The hallway was empty, silent, but I felt watched nonetheless, scrutinized by unseen eyes. That evening, there was a knock, a soft, insidious rap. I peered through the peephole and saw a pie sitting innocently on the floor. No one in sight, no one around. It was homemade, with a lattice crust that might have been beautiful, even artistic, if not for the smell that seeped around the edges. A sweet rot, like fruit left to fester too long in the oppressive sun. A note was tucked under the plate, a small, folded square of paper. "Welcome to the building, Clara." I didn't touch it. Something about that pie felt profoundly wrong, dangerous in a way I couldn't quite articulate, a primal sense of unease. I left it outside, praying it would simply vanish, disappear on its own accord. The blessings, however, continued. Another email arrived from work, this time directly from my supervisor. "The client specifically requested you for their next project. Excellent work." My bank account, when I nervously checked it, showed an unexpected refund from my student loan servicer, a clerical processing error that deposited an extra $300 into my account. But the apartment felt like it was slowly shrinking around me, the walls closing in. The air grew thicker as evening approached, heavy with the cloying scent of mildew and something else, something organic and deeply unpleasant, something indescribably foul. The walls seemed to pulse with the building's own dark heartbeat, and shadows danced in my peripheral vision, always just out of direct sight, teasing the edge of my perception. I desperately tried to leave, to go for a walk, to clear my head of the encroaching dread. But when I reached for the door handle, my hand froze, paralyzed by an unseen force. Terror flooded through me, primal, overwhelming, a tidal wave of pure fear. Every instinct screamed that leaving now, while Clara might be lurking in the hallway, would be a fatal mistake, a choice from which I wouldn't survive. The pie was gone when I checked again, not taken by anyone, simply gone, vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed at all. As darkness fell, the building came alive with a chorus of unsettling sounds. Phantom footsteps echoing within the walls, hushed whispers slithering through the vents, the distant, unsettling echo of doors opening and closing in the empty corridors. I cranked up the volume on the TV, but the noise seemed to seep through anyway, working its way into my skull like a swarm of tiny needles, piercing my defenses. At precisely 11 p.m., I heard it. My name, whispered from the wall beside my bed. Elliot. The voice was unmistakably Clara's, but distorted, stretched and warped, as if the audio was being played back far too slowly, creating a chilling, unnatural effect. "Elliot, can you hear me?" The rule forbade answering. I bit down hard on my tongue until I tasted blood, fighting the almost irresistible, compulsive urge to respond, to acknowledge the presence. The voice persisted, cajoling, pleading, growing more insistent with each repetition. "I know you're there, Elliot. Just say hello. Just one word." I pressed my hands tightly over my ears, but the voice seemed to originate from inside my own head now, my name echoing through the walls, through the floor, through the very air I breathed, a terrifying internal cacophony. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to scream back, to beg it to stop, to simply leave me alone in my misery. The whispers continued relentlessly until dawn, and I didn't sleep at all, tormented by the insidious voice. When the first sliver of morning light finally crept through my grimy window, I cautiously checked the glass of water I'd left outside. It was empty, bone dry, and the air around where it had sat reeked of something rancid and ancient, a foul, unidentifiable stench. I retreated back into my apartment, slammed and locked the door, and realized with growing horror that I was now well and truly trapped. The building had its hooks sunk deep into me now, ensnaring me in its web. The blessings kept coming, but so did the unseen watchers, and I was beginning to understand with chilling clarity that leaving might no longer be an option, that escape was a mere fantasy. Something within these walls had marked me as its own, and I was certain it wasn't planning on ever letting me go, that my fate was sealed. I woke with a jolt to the sharp sound of my keys hitting the kitchen floor. The metallic clatter cut through the otherwise silent morning like a gunshot, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins, and my heart hammered wildly against my ribs as I sat bolt upright in bed. I distinctly remembered hanging them on their designated hook before succumbing to sleep, checking twice out of growing paranoia and unease. But there they were, scattered haphazardly across the cold linoleum, glinting unnaturally in the pale morning light that struggled to penetrate my grimy window. I padded silently to the kitchen, my bare feet making no sound on the worn carpet, and froze in place when I opened the refrigerator door to grab some juice, my hand hovering over the handle. My keys sat nestled among the bottles, ice crystals forming around the cold metal like tiny, grasping fingers of frost, an unnatural and terrifying spectacle. The clammy surface of the fridge was slick against my palm as I retrieved them, the keys so intensely cold they burned my skin with their frigid touch. I hadn't put them there. I would never, under any circumstances, have put them there. Yet here they were, as if they'd been languishing in the freezer compartment for hours, subjected to unimaginable cold. A fleeting shadow moved in my peripheral vision, and I spun around abruptly, my breath catching in my throat. But the apartment was empty, save for the usual morning gloom, the peeling wallpaper clinging precariously to the walls, the ominous water stains spreading across the ceiling like grotesque maps of imaginary, nightmarish continents. But the shadow had undeniably been there, tall, vaguely humanoid, standing just at the very edge of my vision, like a fleeting figure made of smoke and darkness. The hallway light outside my door wasn't just flickering erratically anymore. It was humming with an unnatural energy, not the usual electrical buzz one would expect, but something else entirely, a low, melodic hum that rose and fell in unsettling patterns that sounded almost like speech, like someone singing my name in a voice too low and distorted to properly discern. I pressed my ear intently against the cold, unforgiving surface of the door, desperately trying to make out the elusive words, but the unnerving sound faded as soon as I focused my attention on it, teasing me with its proximity. When I pulled away slightly, it returned, that maddening, almost melody that made my teeth ache deep in my gums and my skull throb with an unbearable pressure. Sleep had been utterly impossible the night before. Every time I'd started to drift off, whispers had seeped through the walls, soft, insistent voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize, punctuated by the occasional word in English, my name mostly, but sometimes phrases that made no sense. Hungry, waiting, soon now soon. I'd followed the rules religiously. The glass of water I'd left outside my door was gone each morning, replaced by that rancid smell that made my stomach turn. I'd avoided eye contact with Clara, kept conversations brief and polite, never invited anyone inside. But the building's attention was on me now, and I could feel it pressing against my mind like a physical weight. I needed to talk to Sam. He was the only normal person in this place who seemed to understand what was happening, and yesterday's cryptic warnings weren't enough anymore. I needed answers. I found him in the laundry room again, feeding quarters into the same washing machine with the mechanical precision of someone who'd performed this ritual countless times. He looked worse than before. His skin had a grayish pallor, and dark circles ringed his eyes like bruises. "You look like hell," I said, trying to sound casual. Sam's laugh was bitter. "That's because I live in it." He glanced around the empty laundry room, then moved closer, lowering his voice. "You're having problems." It wasn't a question. "The rules aren't enough," I said. "They're getting stronger. They always do." Sam's hands shook as he closed the washing machine lid. "You want to know what they are? Fine. They're not people, Elliot. They're something else, something that wears human faces like masks. They've been here longer than this building, longer than this city, maybe." He glanced at the ceiling, and I could see the tremor in his jaw. "They grant blessings to those who follow their rules. Wealth, health, love, success, whatever you need most. But they punish rule breakers. The last tenant in 4B broke one of the rules, spoke to Clara first, tried to be neighborly. What happened to him? His apartment's been empty for 6 months." Sam's voice dropped to a whisper. "They don't just kill you, Elliot. They erase you, like you never existed at all." My blood turned to ice. "How many others?" "More than you'd think. The building's always full, but the faces change. People vanish, new ones move in, and the cycle starts again. He loaded his clothes with jerky, agitated movements. The ones who survive learn to follow the rules. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, take the blessings and pay the price. What price? But Sam was already heading for the door. You'll figure it out, or you won't be around to worry about it. Back in my apartment, I tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. My laptop screen showed the associates project I'd been working on, a logo for a local Thai restaurant, but the lines kept shifting when I wasn't looking directly at them, forming shapes that looked almost like faces. I ordered groceries online, desperate for some normal human contact. When the delivery guy arrived an hour later, I recognized him from the previous day, young, nervous, with darting eyes that kept checking the hallway behind me. "Just sign here," he said, thrusting the tablet at me. But as he spoke, his gaze fixed on something over my shoulder, and his face went white. "Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!" I turned to see Clara standing at the far end of the hall, but something was wrong with her today. Her smile had split wider, stretching her face in ways that shouldn't have been possible, showing too many teeth that glinted like wet glass. Her hands twitched at her sides like a marionette with cut strings, jerky movements that made my skin crawl. "Don't look at her," the delivery guy whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't look directly at her." But it was too late. Clara's head tilted at that impossible angle, and for just a moment, our eyes met. 3 seconds, 4, 5. I couldn't look away, couldn't break the connection. Her gray eyes seemed to expand, becoming vast, empty spaces that pulled at my consciousness like gravity wells. The delivery guy dropped the bags and ran, his footsteps echoing down the stairwell like gunshots. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "She's not human. Get out while you can." I dragged the groceries inside and locked the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. Clara had seen me looking. She knew I'd broken the rule, stared too long, let my fear override my caution. That's when I decided to search the apartment more thoroughly. If the previous tenant had left the rules, maybe he'd left other warnings, other clues about how to survive this place. I started with the kitchen, pulling out drawers, checking behind appliances, running my hands along the undersides of cabinets. I found it behind the refrigerator. The appliance was heavy, but desperation gave me strength, and I managed to pull it away from the wall with a grinding scrape of metal on linoleum. There, taped to the back in a plastic bag, was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. The handwriting was different from the rules, more frantic, scrawled in blue ink that had faded to a ghostly pale. My hands trembled as I unfolded it and read, "If you're reading this, then you found the rules, and you're probably scared out of your mind. Good. Fear will keep you alive longer than courage will." I lived in 4B for 6 years, 6 years of following their rules, keeping my head down, accepting their gifts. They made me rich, promoted me 3 times in 2 years, set me up with the woman of my dreams, cleared my debts, fixed my health problems. The building gives you everything you've ever wanted. But I got careless, got comfortable, started thinking of Clara as just a weird neighbor instead of what she really is. One morning, trying to be friendly, I spoke to her first, offering a simple good morning before she could utter the words to me. She saw me then, truly saw me, and now they're done with me. It's 3 a.m. as I write this, the sound of something scratching at my door a constant, unnerving presence. It's been going on for 4 hours now. They know I'm planning to leave. They can smell it on me, the intention to run, to flee. But they won't stop me, not because they can't, but because they want me to run. They want me to tell people about this place, to spread the word, to lure in new tenants. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't get comfortable. Don't ever think they're anything less than predators wearing human masks. And if you possess an ounce of sense, you'll leave before they sink their hooks too deep into you. The blessings are bait, nothing more, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to simply walk away. Marcus, P.S. Check your bank account. If it's empty, you've waited too long. My blood turned to frigid ice as I absorbed that last, chilling line. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and logged into my banking app. The screen loaded with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity of dread. Zero balance. Not just a low balance, but completely, utterly empty. Every single penny I possessed, including the unexpected refund from yesterday, was gone. No transaction history, no explanation offered, just a flat, stark zero staring back at me like a cold, hard death sentence. The building felt like it was closing in around me, the walls pressing closer with each shallow breath I took. I was trapped, financially ruined, physically confined, spiritually imprisoned in this nightmarish place with creatures that wore human faces and fed on the raw, primal fear of their prey. That night, I paid dearly for my violation of the rules. My apartment door rattled violently in its frame for what felt like hours. The unsettling sound punctuated by Clara's voice calling my name from the hallway. But her voice was wrong now, twisted and distorted, layered with strange harmonics that made my very bones ache with an unbearable dread. Sometimes she sounded like herself, sometimes like a frail, ancient woman, sometimes like an innocent child, all of them calling for Elliot, all of them desperately wanting me to open the damn door. I huddled in the relative safety of my bathroom with the rules clutched tightly in my sweating hands, reading them over and over again like a desperate, whispered prayer. The scratching started again around midnight, the sound of fingernails or claws dragging across my door in slow, deliberate patterns, spelling out words perhaps, or drawing symbols that my mind refused to comprehend. Then, at 2 a.m., an email arrived from my supervisor. Client rejected your latest designs. They're looking for a more experienced designer. We'll discuss your future with the firm regarding the designer position on Monday. My back began to ache with a renewed intensity, the familiar stabbing pain returning with a vengeance. The blessing was fading fast, the protective shield lifting like a dissipating fog in the morning sun. I'd looked too long, broken the sacred rules, and now they were swiftly taking back their unholy gifts. With shaking hands, I packed a bag, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag with desperate haste and growing panic. I had to leave, had to run like Marcus had run before they decided to erase me from existence entirely. But when I reached for my car keys, they weren't on their designated hook. They weren't in the kitchen. They weren't anywhere to be found. As I searched frantically through my apartment, turning over cushions and checking every drawer with a growing sense of despair, a new sound reached my ears. Laughter, soft, melodic laughter coming from right outside my window. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape its confines. Clara's face was pressed against the glass, her once gray eyes now completely black, like staring into the infinite abyss of empty space. Her too wide smile filled the entire window, and her pale hands were spread against the glass like grotesque starfish. We were on the 5th floor. There was no fire escape, no ledge, no possible way for anyone to be outside that window. But there she was, floating impossibly in the empty air, her smile stretching wider and wider until it threatened to split her face in half. She mouthed a single, chilling word through the glass. "Stay!" I screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into my coffee table and sending my laptop flying across the room. When I looked again, the window was empty, but her handprints remained on the glass, pale, ghostly impressions that slowly faded as I watched in horrified fascination. The scratching at my door had abruptly stopped. The hallway was eerily silent, but I could feel them out there, waiting patiently in the oppressive darkness beyond my walls, patient as predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. I was trapped in apartment 4B with creatures that weren't human, and tomorrow I would be forced to decide whether to keep following their twisted rules or join the ever-growing list of tenants who had simply vanished without a trace. Either way, I was beginning to understand with chilling clarity that leaving might not be an option anymore. The building had claimed me as its own, and it wasn't planning to let me go. I woke at 2 a.m. to my name echoing through the walls with an intensity that made my bones ache. Elliot. The voice was undeniably Clara's, but distorted now, layered with unholy harmonics that seemed to emanate from multiple throats at once. "Elliot, come out and play." The The sound burrowed deep into my skull like sharp needles, and before I could stop myself, before I could remember the rules clutched in my sweating hands, I screamed, "Stop!" The word tore from my throat, raw and desperate. Just stop. The moment the sound left my lips, I knew I'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The air in 4B turned glacial, so cold that my breath misted in white clouds before my eyes. A presence flooded my apartment, vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman. It pressed against my consciousness like a physical weight, and I felt something terrible turn its full, undivided attention to me with the chilling focus of a seasoned predator that had finally cornered its long-sought prey. Clara's voice came from right outside my door now, but it was wrong, stretched and distorted like a vinyl recording played at the wrong speed. "Oh, Elliot," she crooned, and her voice was sweet poison. "You spoke to us, you." Apartment, vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman. It pressed against my consciousness like a physical weight, and I felt something terrible turn its full, undivided attention to me with the chilling focus of a seasoned predator that had finally cornered its long-sought prey. Clara's voice came from right outside my door now, but it was wrong, stretched and distorted like a vinyl recording played at the wrong speed. "Oh, Elliot," she crooned, and her voice was sweet poison. "You spoke to us, you answered. Now we can come inside." The door handle rattled, then turned, and I heard the deadbolt sliding back on its own with a sinister click. Panic, sharp and immediate, flooded through me like ice water. I snatched up the rules and my phone and bolted for the bathroom, slamming the door behind me and twisting the flimsy lock with shaking fingers. Wedging myself into the cramped corner between the toilet and the cold wall, I clutched the brittle paper containing the rules like a lifeline in a storm. The presence was inside my apartment now, a palpable weight in the air. I could feel it moving through the rooms, searching, testing the atmosphere with an almost predatory curiosity. Footsteps that made no sound, yet somehow shook the building's foundations, resonated through the floor. The temperature plummeted with unnatural speed until frost began to bloom on the bathroom mirror. My breath now coming in sharp, white puffs that hung in the frigid air. "Where are you, Elliot?" Clara's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the very walls themselves, a disembodied threat. "We just want to talk. We just want to play." I pressed my hands tightly over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but her voice seemed to bypass my defenses, resonating from inside my own head now. I frantically read the rules over and over in the dim bathroom light, mouthing the words like a desperate prayer. Never make eye contact for longer than 3 seconds. If they speak first, respond briefly. Leave water outside your door. Never invite them in. Don't answer when they call your name. Never be in the hallway after midnight. I'd broken the silence rule. I'd answered when she called my name, a transgression I couldn't undo. But I was still alive, still conscious, still recognizably me. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe the other rules could still offer some protection, some fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. The presence circled my apartment like a shark scenting blood, and I could hear things being moved, displaced with deliberate malice. My laptop crashed to the floor with a sickening thud. Books tumbled from shelves, their pages fluttering like dying wings. The refrigerator door opened and closed with a deliberate, rhythmic bang, each slam making me flinch and recoil. Come out, Elliot," Clara sang, her voice laced with mocking sweetness. "We know you're hiding. We can smell your fear, Elliot. It's delicious." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The cold seeped through my clothes and into my bones until I was shivering so violently my teeth chattered uncontrollably. But gradually, as dawn approached, the oppressive presence began to fade, its power waning with the encroaching light. The temperature rose, degree by agonizing degree. The footsteps grew fainter, more distant, until they were nothing more than a whisper in the back of my mind. By the time pale morning light finally crept through the bathroom's tiny window, the apartment had fallen silent, a silence that was almost as unnerving as the chaos that had preceded it. I waited another hour, every nerve screaming in protest, before I dared to crack open the door. My living space was a scene of utter destruction. furniture overturned, books scattered across the floor like fallen leaves, my laptop screen spiderwebbed with cracks. But I was alive somehow, impossibly. I was still alive. I packed with desperate efficiency, throwing clothes and essentials into my duffel bag with frantic movements. My hands shook so violently that I could barely fold shirts and gather toiletries. I had to leave, escape. I couldn't survive another night like that, trapped in that waking nightmare. Whatever job opportunities one might lose, whatever financial ruin awaited me, nothing, absolutely nothing, was worth staying in this cursed place. But as I reached for my phone to call a cab, an email notification chimed, a discordant note in the oppressive silence. Almost against my will, I checked it, my heart pounding in my chest. The subject line made my breath catch in my throat. Urgent. Lead designer position, the Morrison and Associates project. My supervisor's message was brief, but potentially life-altering. Elliot, fantastic news. The Morrison and Associates was so impressed with your preliminary designs that they've specifically requested you as lead designer for their complete corporate rebrand. This is a six-figure project with the potential for ongoing work. The client specifically asked for you. Contract details attached. This could be the beginning of a very promising career. Congratulations. I stared at the screen, the words swimming before my eyes, my packed bag forgotten at my feet. 6 figures. Lead designer. Corporate rebrand. The kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime, if it came at all. The kind of project that could wipe out my student debt entirely and set me up for the kind of career I'd always dreamed of. A golden ticket out of the life I had been living. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, snapping me out of my daze. Congratulations on your success. Some rewards are worth the price. A friend. A chill ran down my spine. I knew with absolute certainty that this opportunity was inextricably connected to the building, to the things that lived within its walls. They were offering me a choice, a Faustian bargain. Flee and lose everything, or stay and accept their terms, whatever they might be. A knock at my door made me jump, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I peered through the peephole and saw Sam standing in the hallway, looking tired but oddly pleased, a strange mixture of emotions playing across his face. "You made it," he said when I cautiously opened the door. His voice held a mixture of relief and something that sounded suspiciously like approval. "I heard the commotion last night. Thought you might be gone by morning." I almost was. I gestured to my packed bag, a silent testament to my near departure. Sam nodded, his gaze flicking to my phone where the email was still open, glowing with an almost malevolent light. "Job opportunity? How did you?" "They always offer something when you survive your first real test." He stepped into my apartment, surveying the wreckage with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen it all before, his expression unreadable. "You broke a rule last night, answered when they called. But you survived because you didn't invite them in, didn't open the door. The bathroom probably saved you. Running water, enclosed space, they don't like confined areas." "This is insane," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. The words hollow even to my own ears. "Is it?" Sam picked up one of my scattered books and placed it carefully on the table, his movements deliberate and precise. "You just got offered a career-making project. Your back pain's gone, isn't it? When's the last time you worried about money?" He was right. I touched my lower back experimentally, half expecting the familiar stab of pain. Nothing. No pain. No stiffness. Just a lingering sense of unease. And the email on my phone represented more money than I'd ever dreamed of making. A promise of security and success. "Now you know how to live here," Sam continued, his voice low and serious. "Follow the rules religiously. Never get comfortable. Never let your guard down. Take the blessings they offer and pay the price they demand, whatever that price may be. It's not a life everyone can handle, but for those who can," he shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "The rewards are substantial." Over the following weeks, I learned the strange, unsettling rhythm of veteran life in the building, the unspoken rules and the constant undercurrent of dread. Every night, I set out a glass of water, a silent offering to unseen powers. Every morning, it was empty, and the air around my door reeked of something ancient and wrong, a smell that clung to my clothes and haunted my dreams. I kept my eyes down when I passed Clara. I navigated the hallway, never daring to meet her gaze directly, never initiating conversation. When Clara flashed that unnervingly wide smile and tilted her head at that impossible angle, I offered a polite nod and continued on. Scratches materialized on my walls every few days, thin, deliberate striations that resembled tally marks, as if keeping score of something best left unknown. I concealed them with paint, but they invariably returned. The blessings, however, continued unabated. The Morrison and Associates project proved a resounding success, attracting 3 additional high-profile clients. My student loan debt vanished, not paid off, but expunged as if it had never existed. A promotion materialized at the firm, accompanied by a salary that elicited open envy from my college peers. But the watchers remained a constant presence. I sensed them within the walls, lurking in the shadows, residing in the spaces between my heartbeats. Clara's presence grew heavier with each passing day, her smile wider, her stare more intense. The other residents of the 5th floor, pale specters glimpsed in my peripheral vision, seemed to multiply. Sometimes I counted 6 or 7 of them in the hallway, standing motionless, all fixedly watching my door. I developed a set of routines designed to ensure my safety. Double-locking the door each time I entered, verifying the locks before retiring for the night, avoiding the hallway entirely after 11 p.m., allowing myself a full hour buffer before midnight, speaking only when spoken to, and then only in brief, courteous phrases, keeping my eyes downcast, my head bowed, my voice subdued. The building had seemingly accepted me as one of its own, but that acceptance came with a heavy price. I was under constant surveillance, every decision scrutinized by entities that wore human faces but concealed alien intelligences behind their unnervingly perfect smiles. Some nights, I lay awake contemplating escape, but where could I possibly go? My career was now inextricably linked to this place, built upon foundations I dared not question. My success was undeniable, tangible, yet it was also tethered to this building, to these rules, to these watchers. I was safe, prosperous, and successful. I was also trapped. 3 months after that initial, terrifying night, I stood at my window, gazing down at the alley where I had once parked my car as a nervous newcomer. A young woman was in the process of moving boxes into the building, likely another desperate graduate student lured by the impossibly low rent. I watched her struggle with a heavy box and felt a pang of something akin to sympathy, or perhaps envy. She still possessed a choice. She could still flee. Clara materialized in the hallway behind her. Her smile stretched wide, and I witnessed the newcomer's face contort as some primal instinct recognized the danger. But Clara's voice was melodic and welcoming as she offered assistance with the boxes, and I realized the cycle was beginning anew. I closed my curtains and returned to my computer, where 3 new design projects awaited my attention, high-paying projects from clients who specifically requested me, projects that would ensure my continued comfort, success, and confinement to this place forever. The scratches on my wall had proliferated overnight, covering a significant portion near my bed. In the morning light, they almost resembled words, a message carved by patient, inhuman hands. I would paint over them once more, and they would inevitably return, because that was the price of the blessings I had accepted. Outside my door, I detected the faint sound of Clara's footsteps and the whisper of her voice calling a new name. The building was feeding once again, growing stronger, adding another tenant to its collection of the blessed and the damned. I opened my laptop and began to work. The Morrison and Associates logo stared back at me from the screen, sleek and professional and built on foundations I tried not to dwell on. But it was mine, earned through talent and terror in equal measure. This was my life now. Safe behind rules written in desperation by someone who had fled into the night, prosperous beyond my wildest dreams, and watched by things that weren't human. Successful and trapped and resigned to a future measured in glasses of water left outside doors and scratches that appeared on walls like cancer. It was enough. It had to be enough, because leaving was no longer an option, and staying meant accepting that some prisons came with golden bars. The building had claimed me, and I had chosen to let it.